Welcome to Rewiring Health. This podcast is for those of you who have an eating disorder, chronic pain, or both. In this channel, we'll dive deep into inspirational stories of those who have healed from both and also get into the mind-body connection and how we can heal the mind through the body and also heal the body through the mind. Come and join me on this journey. I'm sure you've heard the benefits of gratitude journaling, expressing gratitude, feeling gratitude. But if you're going through something really tough in life and you're struggling, it can feel so foreign to even conceptualize how to feel like that. And that's how I felt a few years ago when I was going through just pure chaos in so many aspects of my life. And I remember listening to this podcast that I was always listening to at that time. And it was talking about gratitude. And I'm like, that doesn't even it didn't even resonate with me because I'm like, look at my life. What am I supposed to be grateful for? And I've had such a shift in my perspective from then to now. But I remember at that time, it just felt like it was completely overwhelming and that I couldn't focus on anything that was positive because there's so much negativity in my life. And that's what my brain was focused on. So if you're someone who hears all the benefits of gratitude, and there are benefits, and I will talk about those today, but you feel like you can't actually resonate with that or figure out how to implement into your life and don't even know why it's important to express gratitude or feel gratitude, then stick around for this podcast because I'm going to tell you what the science behind it is so that it actually has a basis for why it works and how it retrains our brains to think differently. And I'm also going to tell you about the steps that I took to start feeling gratitude because for me, I didn't know how to do that. It was something that didn't even make sense to me because of what I was going through. So a few years ago, my husband and I were building our house. And we were living with my parents while we were building. So we had 3 dogs, myself, my husband, and our first child that we had at that time. And so it was just, and we had just had him. He was a baby. So it was a lot going on. On top of that, I was working full time, commuting an hour to work. And I was a travel therapist, physical therapist. So I was driving not only an hour to work, but driving to people's homes an hour away. So I was working 10 to 11-hour days, 5 days a week. And then after work, I would come back and then go to the construction site. Meanwhile, I was also coordinating with my husband as a general contractor. We were coordinating everything that needed to happen to build our house. So talk about being overwhelmed. We were completely overwhelmed. And on top of that, I'm trying to be a new mom, trying to be present for my child, trying to savor those moments because we know how quickly that baby stage goes away. And I remember I was driving to work and my husband was dropping my son off at daycare. And I just felt just so sad that I wasn't there to drop him off. I wasn't there to be with him. I was driving an hour while I was pumping in the car. And then I was getting to work, just completely overwhelmed at work. Because I felt like I was also being very much taken advantage of by my company because they were putting me everywhere and it was a stressful job and you had to be on your game. And then I would drive home an hour and it was already dark and I'm like, I just want to get home. I just want to see my baby. And then on that drive, I was also trying to coordinate all these contractors to come to our house and to get things done and get this project done so we could finally move on with our lives. And then, I would get home and I would go right to the construction site. I would be, taking care of my son while I'm like trying to help install electric, while I'm trying to hammer, while I'm trying to sand the walls and paint. And it was just so overwhelming. And I remember just thinking at this time, like, oh my gosh, I don't enjoy anything. I just feel like I'm going through the motions and trying to survive every day. Like I don't even enjoy this. And I'm like looking at my son and feeling like, I know this is a precious gift. I know it is, but don't even feel like I'm present enough to even like savor this and I just felt like so much regret that we had taken on so much at once and that everything was just going on. I felt completely out of control. Like I felt like that life was just passing me by and I'm just trying to get through the motions of it. And on top of that, when all that was going on, our contractor our excavator had dug our septic, and this was just probably the lowest of the low in all this, is that he had dug our septic the night before a huge downpour. And so we got to the construction site the next day, and we literally had like an Olympic sized swimming pool full of mud. And if you know anything about a septic, you can't have that. Like, it needs to be clean. Like, you have to have like fresh ground in order to build a septic on it. So we had to dig another 2 feet deeper and add more fill into it. And it cost us another $5,000 to do that, on top of everything we were spending, and we were running low at that time. Everything was costing more than we anticipated. We ended up having to fire our excavator at that time. We had to try to find an excavator during the busy season. And it was just like this absolute like soul crushing blow of like, what else can happen? Like, I was just in such a dark place. And like, I would drive to work and listen to podcasts, and it was talk about gratitude. And I'm like, I can't feel grateful. Like, I can't. I just felt like I just didn't even know what that meant, because I was so focused on the negativity that was happening in my life. I was so focused on everything that was going wrong, so focused on how exhausted I felt, so focused on how drained I felt, that to feel gratitude was just completely foreign. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds great, but how do I actually feel this? And so that's why I wanted to do this podcast episode, because I know so many people who listen to this podcast are in that place, that you feel like your life is like spiraling out of control. You're trying to just survive every day. You don't know how to even turn things around. You feel like you don't even know what gratitude means. Like, you always hear the benefits of it, but it's almost frustrating to hear somebody say, be grateful, when you feel like your life is falling apart. And that's exactly how I felt in that moment. So to be here today, where I see the benefits of gratitude, I have learned to implement them, and to think back on who I was back then, it's a huge transformation. And so it is possible to take yourself into a place of healing, but it takes a process. And that's what I didn't understand back then, that I can't just flip a switch and say, yes, I'm grateful. It takes effort, and it takes conscious effort and consistency over time, and the expectation that you won't immediately turn those negative thoughts into positive. That doesn't happen. But what you can do is implement little things every day that change and transform your brain. And that's what I wish I understood then, because I tried and I was frustrated, and it backfired every time. And I felt like it just never hit when I would try to be grateful. And the ironic thing is that I had so much to be grateful for back then. I had a new baby. I was building a house. I had a job. I had a husband who was supportive. I had a supportive family. I had food on the table every night. I had fresh water. I mean, I had clothes on my back. I had so much to be grateful for. And yet I could not see it because of the way my brain was wired. And that is just the most profound thing that I've come to realize, that it's all of how we perceive it. You know, the situation, it was crappy back then, but if I had the tools in place to perceive it differently, it would have been so much different. I would have been able to be present in those moments. And that's what I'm taking forward. And that's what I want to share with you today. So I first just want to share with you, how does gratitude work? Because if you understand how gratitude works and you give meaning to it, our brains immediately will gravitate towards adding that into our lives. And the meaning allows it to have a foothold and a foundation. If someone just says, here, go do this, and they don't tell you why you need to do this, it's arbitrary. It's very obscure. You're like, okay, well, why? You know, like, and then you don't have any kind of foothold in doing that. So I wanted to share the science behind gratitude, that it is legitimate. It actually does change your physiology. It actually does change your brain, and it actually does change your life when you start to implement it in the right ways. So what gratitude does is that it increases the activation of the prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of the brain that's in the front of our heads. And what that center of our brain does is that it controls feelings of reward, interpersonal bonding, and positive social interactions. And these are all things that, as our brain starts increasing the ability to focus on that, it will change the way we feel. And you can think about your brain, it is a muscle. If you were to go to the gym and start working out your biceps, the more you do it, the stronger they're going to get. The brain is the same way. It's weak if you don't train it in the right way. But as you train it over and over and over again, parts of your brain that you're training will become stronger and more dominant. And so if we start training this the right way, we can start increasing the activation of our prefrontal cortex and gain all these benefits. Again, feelings of reward, interpersonal bonding, positive social interactions, and also logical thinking, clarity of thought. There's so many things that that part of the brain controls that we wanted to activate more. Another part of the brain that activates during gratitude or expressing gratitude is a reticular activating center. So it's a long name for basically the filter of your brain. That's what it is. So every day we are bombarded with information, everything, things you don't even realize you're bombarded with. Like there's light, there's sound, there's cars going by, there's people all around, there's things that you're taking in. But if your brain was taking in and thinking about every single bit of stimulus during your day, it would basically go into overdrive. Like I think of those cartoons where they like can't handle it and they like just kind of combust. Like that's what our brains would do. Like it can't process all that information. So what the reticular activating center does is say, okay, what's important? What do you need to focus on? And then I'm going to dim out the rest of it. So I'm going to quiet the noise and focus on what you tell me to focus on. So if we just kind of let life happen without any kind of conscious effort to change this, unfortunately, our brains tend to move in the negative direction because they're trying to survive. So negative input is going to increase that fear in the brain and say, we need to protect ourselves. So unfortunately, we're just wired in that way to think more negatively, and our brains will start filtering out everything that's not negative and focus straight on the negative. So when we start to practice gratitude, write things we're grateful for, focus on those things in life, what our reticular activating center does is that it becomes trained. And now it starts filtering out all the negative things, the things that don't serve you. And you start strengthening its ability to focus on those things that you are grateful for. And it starts focusing on that and making it more part of your regular thought process. And gradually, as that is strengthened, those things that are negative become that background noise that's not important for your brain. So again, a huge benefit of focusing on gratitude every day. Another part of that, the science behind gratitude, is that you get a surge in your neurotransmitters or your chemicals within your brain. And the three that primarily you will have an improvement and an increased balance of that are going to be dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. So dopamine is for motivation and reward. So it's going to give you a higher drive to work towards the things that are meaningful to you. And it's also going to be your reward center where you can feel like you are being successful in those. You can feel the joy of moving forward in that direction. So that's why dopamine is so important for our brains and for our lives. Serotonin is our feel-good chemical. That's that like overall joy that we feel, like life is okay. When we have that in our brain, things just seem like they're more manageable and it doesn't feel so daunting. And it just makes you feel good when you have appropriate levels of that. And then lastly, oxytocin. Oxytocin, it's mostly known for when women are pregnant and they're bonding with their child. There's a spike in oxytocin, but we all have oxytocin flowing through our bodies. And that is known for empathy, love, and trust. And what a beautiful way to feel about ourselves is to increase those neurotransmitters so we can feel empathetic for ourselves. We can feel love, we can feel trust, and feel that for other people. And this is also a neurotransmitter that increases when we like hug our dog, hug our children. So expressing gratitude can mimic that as well. So Those are the three main parts of how gratitude impacts the wiring of your brain. It's an increased activation of the prefrontal cortex, increased activation of reticular activating center, and improved balance of neurotransmitters or your brain chemicals. All those things play a role in allowing gratitude to change your life, change your perspective. And so that is the basis for why gratitude is so important. So if you're a sciencey person, that may have made a lot of sense to you. If you're not, I hope it at least made it feel more concrete, that it's not just some obscure concept, that it is an actual thing that our bodies can change and actually become better at expressing that gratitude and become better at internalizing the benefits of it. So how do you start? It sounds great, but if you're in that really tough place like I was a few years ago, it can feel just, again, overwhelming and foreign. Like, how do I even integrate this into my life? And so I'm going to tell you what I did to change my perspective, change my ability to express gratitude, feel gratitude, and gain these benefits within my life. So the first thing I did is I started small. And that was a mistake I made back then because I felt like my life was just complete, utter chaos. And when I thought about gratitude, I thought I had to just think of this like big thing, like, oh, well, I'm so grateful for this, whatever it was, the big thing in my life, but I couldn't even relate to that because I was so focused on negativity. So starting as small as you need to is the biggest thing to do to start moving your brain into a place where it can feel gratitude. So examples of this might be there's a plant in my room and I love looking at that plant and I enjoy it. So that's something I can be grateful for. I'm grateful for the cozy socks I'm wearing. That can be something I'm grateful for. Grateful for my pillow, that I have a pillow to lay my head on at night. Grateful for the shower I took last night. Grateful that I have running water. I'm grateful for having a pen to even just write things down. So it may seem so negligible, these things, because we may just be used to having these in our life and maybe we're not. But if you can find the smallest thing that you can be grateful for, that's a good starting point. And don't feel like anything is negligible. Every little thing in your life is something to be grateful for. So that's the first step. Find something small, start small. Then write it down. So keep just a journal and it can be really quick. Journaling was, again, something I struggled with back then because I'm like, I don't even have time for my life. The last thing I have is time to start journaling. Like that is just, it feels just overwhelming. And it may seem silly because how hard is it to journal for a few minutes? But when you're feeling overwhelmed, it is so true that it can feel just completely overwhelming to add another task on. But start small again. So if you start small by figuring out what you're grateful for, and then just write one sentence a day, that is it. You don't have to write a whole paragraph, just write it down. If it is the plant in the room, you can just have a gratitude list, plant in room. That's it. Just start there. Because these things get your brain thinking, and especially the action of writing it down will solidify that in your brain. So start small, write small. And then the last thing to do, there's 4 steps. 3. So number 3, seek out and ask the right questions. So a lot of times we ask ourselves the wrong questions. Like, you may just find yourself, what else can be going wrong? That wouldn't be a question that would serve you, but a better question would be like, even if things are going tough, like what's something I think can be grateful for? So for example, when I was going through all that chaos and, driving, commuting, pumping in the car, the money that we were losing in the construction site, I mean, it was just pure chaos. But if I actually asked myself a question when I was like doing that commute, I could ask myself, like, what's something right now I could be grateful for? And you know what? I had a car that was running and reliable. That's something I could be really grateful for. I could afford to put gas in my car. That's something I could be grateful for then. I had food for breakfast. Like I ate a bagel on the way in. That's something I could be grateful for. So if I'd ask myself the right questions instead of just focusing on everything that's going to go wrong today and just fearful of the next ball to drop, then now I'm going to allow my brain to start seeing things differently. So ask yourself the right questions. And in those really, really tough moments, if you can just stop, pause, and ask yourself, what is something I can be grateful for or thankful for in this moment? And I guarantee you'll find something, and then just start there. And then the last step is incorporate it into your family time. So this is something that helped me tremendously, and we continue to do this. And as my son got older, I wanted him to start wiring his brain in a way that I didn't have. And so when we sit down for dinner, we just say, "Hey, what's something you're grateful for today? What was your favorite part of the day? Whatever it is, what's something that made you happy today?" So you can phrase it however you want, but it gives you a moment to really think about, okay, what is something that I liked about today? Because so much of our life is automatic, and we get to the end of the day and you're like, what did I even do today? It's like when someone says, "Oh, what'd you eat for lunch?" I don't even know because you're just going through the motions. So if you ask yourself those questions and you do it as a family, or you do it with your friends or whoever's around you, having that accountability and incorporating it into your daily life can be really beneficial for starting to do this consistently. So again, the 4 steps to doing this: start super small as you need to. Write it down, but make, again, that super easy for yourself. Just one sentence, one little phrase. Seek out and ask yourself the right questions, and then incorporate it into your family time, friend time, whoever. If you go call your friend, incorporate it into your daily life. So that way it starts integrating itself into your regular routine. So that is what I do, and it really has transformed my life. I was never somebody who journaled, never somebody who focused on gratitude. It felt, again, so foreign. But every day, most days, I'm not perfect, and that's okay. That's also something I'm working on. But consistently, I can say that I do write down what I'm grateful for. And what I've found is that the more I do it, the easier it gets, and the more I see. It's almost like you start out, and then things just kind of open up. You're like, "Oh, that happened today too, that happened today too. Oh yeah, I'm so glad that happened." It's like you start seeing life so differently, and that took progress. Like, I was consistent for years, so it does take time to get to that point. And like I said, a few years ago, I would not be talking about this because I was not that person. So it is possible to change, transform your life, transform your perspective, which is everything, and rewire your brain to serve you and move you in a direction that will create a life that you love. And that's the biggest gift of all of this. So again, if you're someone who struggles with gratitude, I hope this serves you, moving you forward, and start implementing it in a way that feels authentic, that you can actually feel it and not feel like it's forced. That's the big thing, because our brains don't like to be forced to do anything. So that's why I always recommend as small as you possibly can, so it can feel just more like a natural progression and growth. So if you found benefit in this, and you feel like you have friends or family who would also benefit from this, maybe they're really stuck in a place where they don't know what to do, or they can't even focus on anything that is going good in their life, share it with them and spread that message, because this is something that I wish I knew years ago. It would have made my life easier. I'm grateful that I know it now, but it is so important to understand why we're doing the things we're doing and how we can do it in a way that feels natural, smooth, and not meet resistance within our brains. So thank you again for spending your precious time with me, and I'm grateful for you. Thank you for spending your precious time to listen to this episode of Rewiring Health. My mission is to inspire hope and healing through science-backed practices. If you found value in this, please share with 3 people and leave a review. By doing so, this message can be spread to those who need to hear it most. Also, to get updates on the most recent episodes, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for being part of this community, and I am forever grateful for you.